Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this information session. We've been looking forward to this and appreciate all of you making time. Today, we'll be talking about Decarbonize Bunker Hill and beyond that, decarbonizing LA. This has become a huge conversation, obviously, in the media, in the zeitgeist, and I'm sure within each of your organizations and has been. So I want to thank you for joining us to learn more about the opportunity to plug into what we think is a pretty cool opportunity here in LA. My name is Dave Hodgins. I am Executive Director of the LA Better Buildings Challenge. We'll also be joined by our partners at the Urban Land Institute, LA. And I also want to thank IBI, who have been contributing to this effort and helping us prepare the briefing book, which will help tee up the conversation for the technical assistance panel, which will be taking place just about a month from now here in LA. I think everyone knows about the Urban Land Institute. Most of you are probably members, but we greatly appreciate the partnership, the thought leadership, the resources that ULI has been bringing and creating a platform for us to explore this concept of distributed district energy as a strategy to decarbonize community-wide and support your efforts at the building level, at the company level. The LA Better Buildings Challenge is, for those that don't know us or aren't already partners, funded by LADWP, and we also are a leadership initiative. We've got over 100 million square feet of buildings participating already, meaning we're signed on to science-based targets to decarbonize on a timeline that's consistent with Paris. And we also provide technical assistance and project management, project origination support to help take these concepts, right, from ideas into implementation, provide a direct line into the utilities, our funders, as well as to the city. And some of you may be aware, City Council is moving fast on a building performance standard. And so this is an awesome opportunity to provide your input into that policymaking process. So a bit of context before we start to zoom in on Bunker Hill. LA 100 is a pioneering, really first of its kind study, and it's more than a study, it's a plan to decarbonize the grid here in LA. You probably realize this or know this, that LADWP is the largest municipally owned utility in the whole country. And they've already begun making huge investments towards this. They're the #1 off-taker of green hydrogen. We've got the largest solar incentive program in the country. We've got huge allocations of incentives now for affordable multifamily housing. And of course, the incentives that are funding the efficiency and decarbonization projects that you all are doing. But we cannot just wait, right, for them to decarbonize the supply side. Of course, that will take care of a big piece of this. Efficiency is the wedge that's going to get us there on the timeline, and really we need to be early. All the models coming out from IPCC are showing that things are happening faster and worse, right, than anyone hoped or thought. And so efficiency is what makes this all cost effective, and that's why we call it the first fuel. Policy is also moving. As I mentioned, City Council has introduced now what's becoming a series of motions to introduce a building performance standard, AKA a carbon tax, like what some of you may be dealing with in New York and other markets. And this summer, LA Housing Department and LA Department of Building and Safety, as well as a new department called aptly named Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, are kicking off a stakeholder engagement process. And this is really the tip of the spear, right? You guys are the leaders. Bunker Hill is the cultural and civic center and business center of downtown LA. So this is a great way to get your voices heard. So that's a link there to register for updates. It will be live in the version of the slides that you receive, as well as in the follow-up email, but encourage you to throw your name in there. And by participating in this effort, providing stakeholder interviews, you're helping to shape that. Also, as I mentioned, LA is not acting alone here, right? The private sector has for a long time been leading in LA. We're the #1 Energy Star city ever since EPA has been keeping track. But the policy is needed, the legislation is needed in order to broaden the base, right? To bring up the bottom, to get those smaller buildings, the Class B and C buildings that maybe haven't been paying attention. And also to, with that, level the playing field, give credit, give clear targets to you all who are the leaders. And one of the big goals that we have is to make sure that this is not totally different, right, than what you're dealing with in other markets, that we're not sort of exacerbating some of the reporting fatigue that you may be feeling. And of course, there are 88 cities just in LA County. So how can we be consistent there so that your buildings on the west side are not dealing with a different set of requirements on the east side? And the cool thing about what we'll talk about today with this distributed district energy opportunity is that Centrio, the owner operator of the Bunker Hill plant, also own and operate other central plants in LA and see the potential to develop new ones in other markets. And so they will be talking more about that and where they've done it before. All of this work is being facilitated, supported by a generous grant from the ULI Greenprint Foundation, who has launched a net zero imperative. And this is a global effort. So LA is one of 7 projects globally that were selected through a competitive process to do a technical assistance panel. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I want to just invite Marty Borko, Executive Director of ULI-LA, to say a couple words.
Well, thanks, David. And I think you covered it. You know, we're excited to be on the team with LABBC and with IBI, and we went after one of ULI's Greenprint Net Zero Imperative grants, and we were successful in winning that, and that's the basis of working with all of you on getting ready for this TAP that's coming up in mid-May to dive into a little more of what David's talking about.
Thanks, Marty. So what is distributed district energy? Some of you may have heard about district energy, but this concept of distributed district energy is our riff on that. It's the potential that we see here for an innovation, a strategy to take it further, right? As we look to decarbonize, not just to achieve cost efficiencies or energy efficiencies, but now we've got this new variable that we're trying to get at, which is, of course, carbon. And let's not also forget the equity component here, and how can the smaller, less well-resourced buildings participate in the energy transition. So I want to invite Michael Saltzman, and Carlos Del Cid from Centrio to talk a little bit about what is district energy, what is the infrastructure that's in place, and also Martin Howell, one of our partners from Arup, is going to be pulling together an energy model and to talk about this new riff of this distributed idea. So Michael, I wonder if you could just give a 30-second primer on district energy, and Carlos, then maybe you could talk about the Bunker Hill plant, which you manage.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dave. As Dave mentioned, I'm with Centrio. I oversee business development here, and then Carlos is Director of Operations. He's been with Centrio, I believe, over 20 years, but you can speak to that. So he really knows the inside out of the operations. But I mean, in general, hopefully everyone here does know what district energy is, but a lot of people don't. Centrio is the largest pure play district energy company in the country. We have facilities in cities around the country, LA, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Houston, and several others. We also work on entire college campus energy central plant systems, which is very similar, but focused on college campuses themselves. And then, all types of building types, especially ones that are campus oriented, certainly airports and stadiums and hospitals oftentimes have central plants. So we will come in as a design, build, finance, operate partner of those for those projects. In the case of LA and our typical systems, we have a central plant in Bunker Hill, and then we have 3 others around the city. And what they do is they generally, what they can do is generate, distribute, and store energy focused on air conditioning and heat and hot water. So it's really focused, really chilled water and hot water created at that plant in a central way that's much more efficient than any one building can do, much more resilient than any one building can do. And so it's really, that's the start of it. And then of course, the fact that we've already moved towards electrification. So we're a big step in that electrification process that you need to decarbonize. And I think in the case of Bunker Hill, I'll just prime that. And then Carlos, if you want to add to it, we have a central plant up on Hope and 3rd Street, and that supports right now 9 buildings, and then another 2 are being added. That is a fairly modest system for us, but it has very prominent buildings on it, including some of maybe who the attendees are here, but including the Broad Museum, MoCA, the Cal One office building, Bonaventure Hotel, and several others, as I mentioned. And so, we're obviously very excited to enable you to kind of look inside the, under the hood and see, what we are offering here. This plan has been here since 1967, so it's an incredibly robust place that we update regularly. Carlos, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. Yeah, I just echo what you're saying. Our diversity of load is one of the models that we're able to, do it as a private industry, to be able to do it more efficiently and to provide the best possible service to the customer. So, that in itself, as you guys indicated, the efficiency factor of having diversity of load, it creates a big issue. In addition to the upgrades that you were talking about, Michael, we're also looking at, we already completed the phase out of refrigerants, where we have our 2 newest pieces of equipment, our 514A refrigerant, which is 0 ozone depleting potential. And we don't even have to register them under the CARB 3 regulations. So just a little background for technical aspect of our operation.
Yeah, and refrigerants, for those that aren't aware, are literally the #1 most intense greenhouse gas that there is. Worse than methane, worse than anything. So the volume, right, that gets leaked is relatively small, but the impact is huge. So from a environmental perspective in the ESG, equation, that's huge. And Carlos, I wonder if you could also just talk about the current capacity of the plant and where you see that maxing out. So like, how much room do you have to add more buildings to the existing plant with the investments that you guys are already making?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we just completed the addition of some of the equipment that I mentioned. We're at 12,500 tons of capacity. We probably have about 10,000 that we expect. Even though we expect that potential peak, because again, the diversity of load, everybody peaks a little bit at different times, so we're able to see a significant less than that. Our plant is in preparations to be able to go up to 20,000 tons with N+1, which would be around 22 to 23,000 tons of capacity.
So almost a doubling of capacity. And then if we're looking at really driving efficiency in the buildings that are accessing that and taking advantage of some of the investments you've made in automation and sort of real-time allocation of loads, the number of buildings maybe more than doubles. And I want to put words in your mouth, but just to give a sense of the scale, there's room in the pool. We can come on in. Martin, I wanted to kick it over to you because you have a lot of expertise in this area and you're going to be building a model based on the information that we hope to get from today's participants and others that are watching this video. Could you talk a little bit about the concept of distributed district energy and some of the analysis there that you were going to be doing?
Yeah, so thanks, Dave. So yeah, Martin Howell with Arup. So yeah, as Dave mentioned, we'll be building a model really to see whether there's a there in terms of some of the benefits that we see with both the centralized district energy concept, but also this concept of distributed district energy. And I guess I wanted to just touch on what that was in terms of distributed district energy. So it's really the concept of integrating both the Bunker Hill plant, the existing district energy plant, with distributed plants that are now either new or existing within the buildings of Bunker Hill. And so that's got the potential to provide some pretty significant benefits to Bunker Hill, and those really include just providing more access to space and locations where additional decarbonization technologies can be integrated into the system and benefit the system as a whole. There's also obviously adding additional chilled water capacity to the network. And then from an energy perspective, the network will also have the additional assets that are within those distributed plants, i.e. chillers and so on, that can be really deployed and sequenced together to more optimally match the particular chilled water load at a given time. And obviously that has additional energy efficiency and decarbonization benefits that come along with it. So those are some of the things that we'll be really exploring through this model, and really trying to help inform the discussions that occur on this technical assistance panel.
Thanks, Martin. And I just want to say that we recognize, issues and concerns around control and resilience and so forth. And so that's really the purpose of this exercise, and why we are so grateful for the partnership with ULI and this technical assistance panel, because we want to hear from all of you. What are the business issues that you see with this? And what are some ideas, right? Structures, contracts, technical concepts that can help to mitigate some of those, so that we can really, maximize the opportunity here. So that's the opportunity, is for you all to provide some information that will help us, that will help Martin to do his job, seeing, like he said, is there a there? What do you see as the highest and best use for the space that you have in your building? Could it make sense to demo the building level plant and use that, connect to the district system to replace that, and then install batteries or thermal storage? These are the kinds of ideas that we want and need, right, to be fully exploring now to get anywhere near to the decarbonization goals that we must hit, right? It is freaking hot today. So thanks, guys. Next slide, please. I'll go quickly through these, but why Bunker Hill? Bunker Hill has a really interesting history. This is a picture of Bunker Hill. What's now Grand Avenue, I learned, was originally called Charity Avenue. And that was where all the rich folks lived back when the LA River was flooding every few years and destroying everything. That name was changed to Grand because people didn't want to say they lived on Charity. I thought that was interesting. But this area has been through multiple transformations, right? We saw the CRA come in and basically relocate some of these buildings up the 110 to Heritage Square. And now your buildings are there. Now this is a central business district. Then we saw the Grand Avenue project, very visionary project, bringing cultural institutions to the Hill. And now this has become a global destination. On the next slide, we'll see, what it looks like today. Obviously, you guys know this, but now it is time for yet another transformation as we look at, climate change is here. The social issues that go with that are here, and so now how do we decarbonize in a way that is accretive, that's generative, and that has the bigger picture in mind. Next slide, please. So this is, for those that aren't familiar with the ULI Technical Assistance Panel process, or TAP process, this is a really cool exercise. I'm going to be part of another one here in the city of Inglewood, but what happens as part of a TAP is that ULI convenes a multidisciplinary team of leading subject matter experts. And this is diverse expertise, and these really are leaders. I'm very excited about the roster that we are putting together, but that includes real estate, infrastructure finance, real estate finance, legal perspectives, and there are multiple that come into play here. The technical potential, of course, and the technology part, and as well as the policy part. How does this fit? How does this nest? How is it consistent with citywide policy, the goals of the Department of Water and Power and the investments that they're making? So it's this kind of platform that's really needed when you're looking at an opportunity of this scale and complexity, and the magnitude of the opportunity here. So out of the TAP, which will take place on May 10th and 11th, about a month from now, the panelists, which again is this neutral third-party body of really leading experts, will propose some recommendations. And this is not to say that this is a done deal, right? We know, as I mentioned, there are real issues that need to be worked out, but this provides a map, right? A starting point, a jumping off point. And we hope that you all will help contribute to this first step in what will be a bigger process, of course, to realize the full vision. Our research objectives are basically 4, and I think we've discussed these already, so I won't read this whole thing, but what is the potential here? Is there a there with this distributed district energy concept? And that is in large part going to be driven by your input, right? The buildings that have the potential to connect to this and contribute to the solution. We want to also identify strategies to scale by connecting to additional satellite plants throughout downtown LA. And Michael is going to talk a little bit later about some of their experience doing this. So this is not a new concept. Centrio has done this in Chicago already. I touched on number 3, which is that we need to make sure that smaller buildings have the opportunity to decarbonize as well. And that's not to shift the burden to you all, but the investments that Centrio is making and your participation, the investments that DWP is prepared to make, will really create a pathway for those smaller buildings to connect and to take advantage of that. And that's part of what my team does, is work with all of the buildings that are affected by city policy, all of the buildings that have the option to participate in these incentive programs to do so. And if we're successful, that this becomes a roadmap, something that can be replicated here in LA, in other district plants and other neighborhoods where there's potential for those, but also in other markets. We're part of a global conversation here with 6 other projects, and everyone's pretty excited about this, I gotta say. These opportunities exist in other cities and in other countries, and we'll be learning from and sharing with those as we go. Just to recap again, who all is involved. Most of us are here on the call today, so I think we can move past this slide. Thank you. And Martin, I think you've covered this a little bit already on the previous slide, and we'll get into the specific request for information on a supplemental slide here. But I wonder if there's anything else that you wanted to add that you maybe forgot on the prior discussion.
I mean, just to highlight, I think we're creating this model to really help inform the technical assistance panel, and really this model is looking at understanding the benefit to buildings within Bunker Hill of, first of all, connecting to the Bunker Hill plant, but also the benefit of the decentralized approach, right? The distributed plants within each building as well, and really looking at those from an energy efficiency perspective, and then also from a carbon reduction perspective, which is obviously really critical for the city. So that's really what we'll be looking at through the analysis phase.
Awesome. So Bunker Hill is really the epicenter of what we hope is going to grow to be a bigger effort here. But as Martin said, we got to first look at Bunker Hill, look at the opportunity here, and then if there's a there, how does it scale? So Michael, these slides and the next are for you to say anything else that you wanted to add on the existing plant and any investments that you guys are already making there. Carlos.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I mean, I think on the existing plant here, I mean, I think an important thing about both the existing plant and Centrio as a goal to expand this, and then really what we're talking about here on the tap is that this isn't a charity situation. Going back to your point, I mean, this is a business-driven way of doing things. So here, underlying all of this is, a very good basis for a business deal that can advantage, obviously, us as a company, but advantage each building owner. So I think that's an important first step. And I think the change that we're talking about here is to say that the business equation has another very, very large factor, which isn't always considered, but it's going to have to be, which is carbon, right? And so in the past, what we're looking at is purely, numbers. Does this work? And then what kind of benefits does it have for the owner beyond just the energy efficiency part? For instance, obviously, there's the potential for not needing a cooling tower on the roof of your building, or it actually cuts out a fair amount of mechanical space out of your building that we can now have in the central plant. So that opens up revenue. But and then as Dave mentioned earlier, sometimes there's a scenario where your equipment has to be replaced or it has some life left on it. We have kind of business scenarios for each of those. So there's a way for us to come into any type of existing building or new development, and I think that's a great starting point for these discussions. So that said, I think each building owner has to look at it differently. But for us as a company, we really look at essentially nodes that will be usually can start with one project. This plant actually was built as a plant in late 60s and grew incrementally over time. But our other systems, oftentimes they start with a project. And then what we do is we build a new plant into that project and then have distribution capability from there. So here on Bunker Hill, this is 11 buildings. You can see all the green are buildings that are not on the system. So there's plenty of growth potential on Bunker Hill. But as we know, downtown LA has a lot of growth going on. South Park, and it's high density growth and high density buildings and high energy demand buildings. So these are all things that are the ingredients for making district energy work. And so we're looking at how to expand into South Park, how to expand in the Civic District, how to expand down in the Arts District. And so those would be subsequent conversations we would have about how we do that. And then when you start to get into this distributed discussion, maybe that opens up even more doors, right? Like you were saying, Dave, like it opens up, and Martin, it opens up the opportunity for starting to incorporate renewable energy, localized potentially, as well as energy storage. So these are things that we are looking at now, and I think would all be on the table for these discussions.
Absolutely. And you touched on new construction, Michael, but could you just elaborate on the business scenario there?
Yeah, well, the business scenario for new construction, if it's within the close proximity to our existing lines, then usually the business decision is, okay, what's the closest route for us to connect to our existing plant, and then the compelling argument for that owner is obviously for new construction, it really opens up opportunities for the architects. You don't have to do anything; you can do things with the roof. So we are looking at several new construction projects right in this area that match that. But as far as new locations, like it might be that it's too far to go to a new building, say down in South Park. We might, or in actually even the Civic District is where we're looking at quite a bit. And so we would build a new plant as a part into that plant. We would actually rent space from that building owner, for the life of like a 30 to 40 year contract. So there's revenue for the building owner. And then of course we supply the cold water, maybe the hot water, and then we export from there. And ultimately we would tie that plant back to this plant so that we have incredible resiliency options now to be able to turn one plant off in case of emergency, or also what I think what Carlos will talk to you about, how we can even further balance the loads and make it more energy efficient, more water efficient, and more efficient with chemicals by having plants that are tied together like that.
Maybe we can go to the next slide that shows, one of the ideas for full expansion. And the red line, if folks can see it, is hot water, which is a potential that we're going to look at in a future phase, but Centrio is already considering, and maybe of interest to some of you, especially the residential owners that are on the line. But yeah, Carlos, was there anything you wanted to add to Michael's point about balancing loads or taking advantage of different load profiles as we build out?
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, no, as far as, the more it grows and the more other facilities that are connected to the system, not only that it does become more efficient, but also the distribution becomes most robust, that we can start considering tying it into at different corners. So you have multiple loops within the main distribution system. So it's an additional advantage as we continue to grow.
Right. And again, the green that you see on this slide are all potential customers, right? Buildings that are within striking distance to cost effectively connect either to the existing plant or to one of the potential satellites that have been identified. And like Michael said, there's always the option to build a new one, right? If there's space and interest.
Yeah, and David, if I add one more point on this, I think you brought up, and maybe it's kind of later, but I mean, typically our projects are tying into the larger buildings, right? That's the most business, cost-effective business decision is usually a large project. But we do have systems around the country that have smaller buildings on them as well. Our Seattle system has, over 170 buildings on it, and it was formerly a municipal system. So, that was kind of built in infrastructure. But I think my point here is when we go to expand, like you can see up the upper part of the map, that's actually in the pink is actually the county district system. And it's possible that we could tie these systems together and have one big system. And then, if in the cases of that, all of a sudden there's all these extra pipes that are nearer to smaller buildings. So now it makes it a lot more cost effective to be able to get smaller buildings online that are like right on that pipeline. And maybe you can even create little clusters, and then you can, do one contract at, 3 different buildings at the same time, and that'll hold the cost down for those customers. Awesome.
And I know you guys have done a similar sort of expansion and link up in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And Chicago, Chicago is really our case study for what we want ultimately downtown LA to be. So Chicago, we all know it's different than LA, but the downtown of Chicago and the downtown of LA actually have a lot of similarities as far as, geography, size, density of buildings, et cetera. So in the case of Chicago, we started with one plant in 1996. And then today we have 5 different interconnected plants around the entire Chicago inner loop with we have over 100 million. I think it's 100. No, we have not quite 100 million square feet, but we have over 100 customers on that system, including many very familiar high rises, big projects. Every type of use: residential, office buildings, hospitals. And so, but in that case, we grew incrementally. So it went plant by plant. So one plant was tied to a couple of building opportunities. Then another big building opportunity came. We did another plant. And then in each case there, we also have energy storage built in. We have ice storage facilities. And we're also doing something very innovative, which is the deep river water cooling, using the river itself for cooling. So that and as I said, we actually have the largest ice battery storage in the country. So that is a real model for us. And then all 5 plants are connected as well. So we have that resiliency we were talking about earlier.
Awesome. And that case study is going to be a really powerful resource for the panelists as we look at, you know, the model here, the analysis that we're doing here, and Chicago as an analog for what's possible. So on the next slide, we'll talk about some potential future phases of work, known opportunities, right? Can we use, well, we know we can, waste heat from the chilled water plant to create a heating loop, right? And that may be more of interest to the hotels and the residential buildings that are in close enough proximity. We don't have as many heating degree days in terms of you know, heating space, but certainly on the water side, absolutely. You talked a lot about resilience and taking advantage of diversities of load, a bigger pool of buildings and distributed systems to draw in, and potential for energy storage, thermal storage, ice storage, all the flavors, and looking at where could that go? Where is there the space? Where would it be most beneficial from a grid resilience and a system uptime perspective? And the smaller buildings, I think we touched on also, this of course is very important from the DWP and the city perspective as they look to decarbonize citywide, that there be, you know, a really compelling and hopefully, you know, easy enough pathway for smaller buildings to participate. Martin, it looked like you wanted to add something on this.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, waste heat, I think in particular is really an interesting concept. I mean, that's going to be the area from a carbon perspective that many of the buildings within Bunker Hill are really going to struggle with. They have gas burning appliances, gas burning boilers, and how do you actually decarbonize that? And I think that's one of the really big potential benefits of this kind of more community-based network is you know, enabling that decarbonization of natural gas burning appliances.
That's a great point. And as the city looks to shape its building performance standard, or, you know, a carbon tax, to say it more bluntly, you know, we know, right, there's not really the technology to one-for-one replace a gas-fired boiler in a large building today. And so this may be, we think, a promising way to do that for larger buildings that might not have other great options, from a cost effectiveness or a technical perspective. So now, how do you guys get involved? Next slide. On 2 slides from now, I will tell you what specific information we would like to have from the building level that will help us evaluate, that will help Martin evaluate the distributed district energy potential, right? And this basically includes some information. All of this will be kept confidential. We're working obviously under NDA with everybody that's on the line here, and would do so with you all. This is a district scale opportunity that we're looking at, but we do need some building level data from you, and I'll get to specifically what that is. I mentioned also the TAP, the Technical Assistance Panel, will happen on May 10th and 11th. On the 10th, we've got a good couple hours blocked to hear from you directly, from the stakeholders, from the buildings, on what are your ideas, what are your concerns. So we will be circulating a sign-up form to provide a stakeholder interview, and we'll be giving time slots where you can speak directly to the panel. And we'll be taking notes, and everything will be reflected in the final report that will be a really powerful planning document for the city and for DWP, and hopefully for each of you as we go forward here boldly. And I would encourage you to join the LA Better Buildings Challenge. I won't go into all the details of that here, but my contact info will be at the end. And a lot of you are already members. Those of you that are not, we're looking to grow participation. And this is an awesome peer network. You know, we're here to help, to make connections and, you know, provide resources to move things forward. So a few different ways you can get involved. Next slide, we'll talk about the timeline. So today, I believe, is April the 8th. So in a week, we would like to have the information from you, and it's nothing earth-shattering. I'll get to it on the next slide, that will help to build this energy model and the is there or there model that Martin is putting together. My colleague Bethany just circulated a form through the chat, so feel free to go ahead and do it while it's fresh if you're able to now. We will also circulate that in the follow-up notes from this conversation. We would love for as many of you to join the LABBC, provide stakeholder interviews as part of the technical assistance panel or in advance. We know schedules are hard, so we're happy to work around your schedules to make sure that we incorporate your input into this process. And then June 8th is our date to release the final report. So we'll synthesize everything that we hear through the panel, the recommendations, and put out a final report on the 8th. And that also happens to be the day of our LABBC Innovation Awards, which we do every year. And that's recognizing the most innovative projects, right? And that's not just about technology, that's what a lot of people think about, but really innovation in terms of thinking. Right, new business models, new ways of engaging and collaborating, which is really what this is all about. So really excited about all of the activity and how this is going to roll up by June. And of course, this is just the start, right? This is a launching point for more conversations, a lot more conversations, but really appreciate your input here. So on the next slide is the kicker from today. In addition to providing a stakeholder interview, we hope that you can provide this very basic information if your building does have a central plant, just an inventory of the chillers, make, manufacturer, capacity, and kW per ton. Boiler inventory, same thing. We also want to look at the potential for waste heat to zero that out, right? That's going to be the part of your carbon stack, right? That's going to be the hardest to get rid of. So we can look at a high level, what's the potential there? And then some trend data for the last 12 months, chilled and hot water trend data. With that basic information, we can extrapolate to see, is there a there? And what are the loads that we'd be looking to meet? So this will also be available. There's a form. You can also just send us an email. We want to make this very easy for you to provide your input into this model, and this will also be shared in the follow-up. I always like to end with a quote before we get into the Q&A, but I like this one a lot from William Gibson. He's one of my favorite sci-fi authors, and he coined the term cyberspace in the 80s, right? before there was the internet. And he says, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. So we got a pun to boot with this one. So with that, we'd like to open it up to Q&A. Please type your questions into the chat box. We've got everybody muted just to keep things orderly, but please take advantage of this time that we have Michael and Carlos from Centrio, and Marty from ULI, and Martin here, and myself to air any questions that you have. And again, we realize, this is not the end of a conversation. So if colleagues or we're not able to make it today or something occurs to you later, we're very reachable. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat, and my colleague Bethany will read those.
Dave, it looks like we've got a pretty well-informed attendee list today. No direct questions here. So I guess unless there's anything else that you guys want to sort of expound on that you've already sort of covered, it looks like we're quiet on the question front today.
Okay, well, I think we did a good job. We'll take that as great feedback. Thank you everybody for the time. Thank you, Marty, Martin, Carlos, Michael, for making yourselves available. There's my contact info as well as Marty's from ULI. everybody will be receiving a recording as well as the slides and the links to submit your data or request a slot to provide a stakeholder interview. So thank you all, and we'll give back 15 minutes. Happy Friday.